Hello, friends. Hello, Lou.
How are we doing today?
Good. Welcome to episode 167. Today we're going to be doing chapter 15, verse 12 and verse 13. These are simple verses, and I'm always very impressed with how the Gita teaches us about some scientific facts that we may not have known about. You know, small little things here and there, and sometimes really big things. But let's move on. So, verse 12 says, "The light which is in the sun, which illuminates the whole world, which is in the moon and also in fire, know that light to be mine," is what Brahman is saying. So, God is saying that whatever light, heat, brilliance comes from the sun and the reflection from the moon and from fire that we generate, all of that is Brahman itself. So these four verses, verse 12, 13, 14, and 15, are usually taken as one, which are talking about the imminence and the transcendence of Brahman.
Mhm.
Now, imminence, just so you're aware, imminence with an I means one thing. Immanence with an A means the condition of being entirely within something. So when something is entirely within something, that is immanence. And here he's talking about the immanence, Krishna is talking about the immanence of Brahman, that Brahman is entirely within everything in the universe and the earth. And he will talk about this through the next four verses. Very interesting. So Brahman is the essence of the entire macrocosm as well as the microcosm. And Krishna goes into detail here. So Brahman, we've heard this before in verse 6 of chapter 15, where he talks about Brahman being the light within us. He talks of the sun that illuminates the senses, the mind, the intellect, if you remember, gives them life so that they may act and perceive and think and feel and come up with ideas. All of this is the immanence of Brahman. Brahman is consciousness. As you know, we talk about I being I, the consciousness, and that is Brahman. Transcendence is that expression that goes beyond the world. So beyond what we see, beyond what we are, beyond the universe, beyond this ethereal concept of Brahman being somewhere up there in the heaven, is this transcendence. Just like all waves in an ocean, if you look at it, is nothing but the ocean, nothing but water. Similarly, everything that you see is Brahman. So that, this is a good sentence to remember, that because of which the sun and fire emit heat and light, and because of which the moon is cool and reflects light, that is Brahman. So these scriptures, by the way, are like a signpost pointing towards self-realization. All of these Vedas basically talk about Brahman and how you're forced to keep looking at getting to Brahman. So these are scriptures are like signpost teachings directing you to that. So it's like, you know, when I was in medical school or pre-med, you had to look through a microscope and look at tiny little things. And they say, oh, you see, oh, there it is. That's that cell. And you're looking, you say, which one? Which one? There's a million cells in here. Then somebody else comes and puts his eye and he says, okay, you see that little blue dot over there? Look back. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, to the right of that, if you look around 2 o'clock, you'll see such and such. Then you see that. So when somebody with some knowledge directs you, you can still see with your eyes, but you need somebody to guide you as to what it is. So similarly, these scriptures are like signposts, like somebody pointing to you in the microscope and saying, this is what you should be looking at. Then you look at it. Oh, you mean that thing that has like little horns on it? Oh, yeah, that one. Okay, I see it now. So that kind of thing. So that explains to us, the scriptures explain to us what it is that we have to see. Now, these four verses tell us what Brahman is, so that when you look at the sun, instead of looking up at the sky and saying, this is a planet that's emitting heat and light, you look at it and you say, wow, that is the eminence of Brahman. That is what Brahman is really. You look at a fire and you say, yeah, that fire is hot. But you also look to see Brahman is. And you'll see this in the next 4 verses. In Hindi or Sanskrit, there's a word called tej, tejas or tej. And that means, I don't know the words for it in English, or if there are any, like radiance, brilliance, heat, all of the qualities that are in light and the sun, in the moon, in fire, that tej, that basic essence of what the sun is all about, moon is all about, fire is all about, that tej is Brahman, is what he's saying. Now, that tej doesn't belong to the sun, doesn't belong to the moon, doesn't belong to fire. It belongs to Brahman and only Brahman. When Krishna says I, he's expressing it as him being the tej of everything. Now, in verse 6, we also talked about how the sun represents the eyes, remember? And
Yes.
the moon represents the mind and feelings and emotions, and the fire represents speech, the organ of speech. So here he starts off in verse 12 with giving you a basic description saying that Brahman is all about the sun, moon, etc. Let's go on to verse 13. Verse 13 says, permeating the earth, permeating the earth, I support beings by energy. I support beings by my energy. And having become the juicy moon, I nourish all plants. You look at this and you say, wow, what a rambling kind of thing. What does this mean? But every word, every sentence, every phrase means something. So let's talk in terms of permeating the earth. Up to now, he said in the previous verse that Brahman is permeating the sun, the moon, fire. Far away. The sun is the furthest away, then comes the moon, then fire is right next to you. Now he's saying, Brahman says, I permeate the earth, meaning I go inside the earth. And we'll see what he says, what he does when he goes inside the earth. But just as a ahead, he talks about going inside earth and giving life to the soil, giving life to the plants, to the roots. And that life then is what we ingest and we digest. And that life has then become inside us. But here he's only talking about permeating the earth. Then he says, permeating the earth, I support beings. Then he said, by energy. So fascinating that up to now, we didn't know. This, don't forget, this was written 3,100 years BCE. Before that was the Upanishads. But he's saying very clearly here, I support beings. Now, if the world is upside down, the earth is upside down, people without gravity would be falling. One meaning of this, support beings, is he's talking about gravity. He talks here about how gravity holds everything to the earth, so that even if you're in that phase where you are in the South Pole and it's winter and you're downwards, you don't fall off the earth. That's what one of the meanings of support beings. The other meaning of support beings is I support them in terms of life by providing food, by nourishing them through vegetables and plants and stuff like that. He also then goes on later to say, I support planets. So he means there that he's supporting the earth, he's supporting the moon, he's supporting the sun. They all have this particular, what is it called? The way of revolving and staying in a particular place and revolving on its own axis. Sorry?
Orbiting.
Orbiting, yes, orbiting around its own axis and staying in a particular way of that orbit. He says, by energy, I support beings by energy. How does he support it? Not with a wooden scaffolding that he puts there, but he supports it just by energy. What energy? He hasn't explained yet, but that energy that is required for gravity, for keeping these planets in their own orbits, that is the energy with which Brahman infuses them. Then he talks about being the juicy moon. Now, you say juicy moon. What does that mean? It's not like a juicy plum, that you eat. What he means by juicy, we'll talk about, because in Sanskrit, the word for moon is soma, S-O-M-E. And soma, as in Monday, Monday comes from the word moon, moon day.
Right.
And in Sanskrit, where Monday came from, it's Somwar. Soma is the moon. So Somwar is the day of the moon. And Som has two meanings. One, it means juice or nectar. And the other, it means the essence of. So that's where this word moon comes from. So when he says juicy moon, question is he talking about the juice or the nectar, or is he really talking about the essence? And I think most people would say
Yeah.
that he's talking about the nectar. So Brahman, through the sun, provides vitality to all living beings. We know that, right? Without the sun, all of us would be dead in a matter of a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Brahman, through the moon, provides fertility. Now, this is something that we know scientifically, that women are affected in terms of their reproductive cycle by the moon, just as the tides and the waves are. What I didn't know, and a lot of people may not know, is that the moon provides nourishment to seeds of plants. I did not know that.
I did not either.
So apparently, if you, just as an example, but this goes beyond just rice and rice paddy fields, that in the areas in India where they grow rice, they take these seeds, rice seeds, and they put them out during moonlight so as to get the nourishment from the moon. And that provides a better and healthier and more robust harvest. I did not know that.
I did
I
not
did
either.
not know that it also provides nourishment to other seeds, not just rice. So Brahman permeates the earth and sustains, maintains, and nourishes all of life. That we just talked about. The Vedas say it is because of Brahman that the earth and all planets remain where they are firmly. Brahman says, I nourish. Push nami cha. Meaning the nourishment in the food is Bhagwan or Brahman. How? How does Bhagwan or Brahman nourish the food? Soma in the form of the essence of nourishment, and Brahman says, having become this fruit or this vegetable, it is I who provides you nourishment. Now, he is the reservoir. Brahman is the reservoir of all the essences of all the fruits and vegetables. I am the self of everything. This is what is described in these four verses 12, 13, 14, and 15. I enter the earth and make it capable of sustaining life. The food is also me. Now, you may ask, well, if the food is you, then aren't you eating Brahman? If the food is Brahman, then aren't you eating Brahman? And say, I don't want to eat Brahman, so I'm not going to eat it. No, you yourself are Brahman. So it's not as if you're eating Brahman.
Right.
Brahman and the food, you and the food are one. So you're just participating in the same thing as if you were to stroke your own head or scratch your own body. This Brahman and the food is one.
Right.
Now, when he says, I permeate the earth, I am in the earth also, we start thinking of God first far away as the sun. Then he says, I reflect through the moon, and I am in the brilliance in the moon is me. Then he says, I am in the earth. Then he says, I am in the fire. Then he says, I'm in the earth. I'm in the vegetables. I'm in the fruits. I am in your body, is
Mm-hmm.
what he says. And as we go to the next few verses, you'll see that he talks about him being the digestive forces in you, the prana within you, the life force within you. He describes himself in the heart chambers, the five sheaths of the body, all of which was fascinating to me. I did not know until I heard it the first time. God says, I hold not only the earth, but also the beings of the earth. Here he mentions gravity. If he were not holding us, we'd all fall off the earth. So I hold and support all beings with my energy, my power. So just like a potter, Kabir was a poet in India, and he says that the potter, his whole life is taking mud and molding the mud and shaping the mud and playing with the mud and doing with it what he wants. And the mud is biding its time and says, wait, there will come a time when you die and I will be shaping you.
Yes.
So that's the analogy that we have to recognize, that, ultimately we have to keep thinking that we have to go to Brahman. We have to go to Brahman by becoming self-realized. Otherwise, it's just a cycle of continuing to be born, and so on. We'll just keep on going and going. So, friends, that is 12 and 13. And hopefully you'll join us for the next verses, 14 and 15. And we'll see you then. Bye-bye.